Okay, we're live. What's up, YouTube? We are back with episode 58 of the Super Deformed Gamescast, the greatest gaming podcast on Thursday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Now, full disclosure, I don't know if there are any other gaming podcasts on at this exact time on this day.
There's
but
plenty.
There are. Are there really? Okay, well, we're
I don't know, dude.
we're probably moderately better than most of them. But as you guys can see, we've got a very, very big panel tonight. A lot of people showed up. Unfortunately, Gabe will not be with us until February. He lives in Brazil, and due to the outdated concept of daylight savings time, time-wise, it's not going to work out for him. But
it's all Ben Franklin's fault.
Yeah. God, I can't believe we still use daylight savings. But
I know. That was a Canadian who invented daylight savings.
College, right?
Yeah, let's not even go there, dude. Yeah,
don't go there.
No politics on this. Enrique made that mistake once, and he's regretted it ever since.
I mean, it was with David Jaffe.
Yeah, we're not going to do that. We're not going there. So anyway, but it's going to be a really cool show tonight because as we've been kind of beating our chest about on Twitter for the past week, we have Mike Laidlaw with us, who of course is the creative director of the Dragon Age series. Mike, thank you so much for joining us, man.
Yeah, no problem. Really good to be here.
It's really good to have you here. Yeah, we were all really excited about this. But anyway, what we're going to do is we are going to just kind of ask Mike some questions about his thoughts on the Dragon Age series. We've got some questions from Twitter, and we're also going to take some questions from everybody in chat as well. I see it's starting to fill up.
Your game is awesome. How awesome is your game?
And so we got somebody from Portugal watching. Cheers from Portugal. Nice. We're glad you're here. But anyway, and then after we do all that, we'll move on into our topic of the day. If I start a little bit or I kind of trip over my words, it's because we've got fucking Mike Laidlaw on the podcast, and I'm a little nervous. So everybody just bear with me, guys. So anyway, Mike, I kind of wanted to start off just by asking you, because I am unaware. So, you're the creative director of Dragon Age. How did you get to this position? Like where did you start at BioWare?
Yeah, so originally I did game writing. I was at a website called the Adrenaline Vault, which may still be around. I haven't checked recently. That was 2000 to 03, which means I got to ride it through the first time the .com bubble burst, and everything kind of went terrible because they would never make any money on the internet. Somewhat, it turns out, a short-sighted point of view. So I rode through that, and having done so, I was forced to pick up a day job because I went from salary to not salary, but free games, which
Nice.
Maybe every writer's story. And the day job ended up being, I'm not going to go into details, but let's put it this way. It was soul draining and horrible. And I was still writing afterwards. So I was still doing reviews and columns, and it was exhausting. I met my wife during that period, and I, to this day, don't know why she put up with me, because I was just this exhausted, angry hack. But what happened was, because I'd been doing that, I felt confident enough. I got an English degree and that kind of stuff, but when you have to write steadily, there's kind of a skill set you develop in terms of focus and being able to kind of push through writer's block and stuff. You're like, I don't have time for writer's block, so I'm going to work on my column because I'm blocked on a review, or I'm going to work on a review because I'm blocked on the column. So I thought, maybe I can do something. I got to the point where I took a sick week. Someone's furiously writing a legal lawsuit about that, and basically said, I'm going to find something else. I need something else, or I'm going to go crazy. And I happened to spot writer at BioWare was an available position, and I essentially, in the course of about 4 days, taught myself how to script in Neverwinter Nights. And up to that point, I'd only ever done Pascal. So I knew a little bit about object-oriented, but that was it. I played a lot of their games. I played all the Baldur's Gates and everything like that. So I did a module in Neverwinter Nights that I submitted that, by all reports, was buggy and fragile.
Oh, I just wanted real quick. I'm so glad Neverwinter Nights was my jam. I just want to point that out. Well played.
Yeah, the end user tool set, right? Being able to kind of build your own stuff. And I built this really kind of obscure scenario where, because I wasn't doing level design, I wasn't applying for that. So I did a thing where you'd been kind of chased into this bar by the cops, and they were out kind of stalking the streets. So you couldn't leave the normal, and you had to convince the various people there to smuggle you out. And so it was just conversationally heavy kind of module. Anyway, I guess it caught someone's eye. By all reports, there were a couple guys who really liked it because they played a druid or something, and they really liked that you could talk to the dog, and the dog kind of spoke in images, and I guess that was the thing that got me over the hump. That, and maybe being Canadian, so you didn't have to immigrate me. Yeah, and they flew me out. I got a exceptionally long interview with like all the lead designers, the senior writers like Drew Karpish and Dave Gator and co, and even Greg, but Ray was on his honeymoon at the time. The two founders, and I landed the job, and I got told on December, I think 23rd, that I'd been hired and I was going to start in February. So I went in on December 24th and quit my call center job, which was terrible. And they were like, but if you quit with no notice, you'll never work in this industry again. I'm like, that's the idea. And like, it was all I had to do was like hit
blacklisted.
the co-star in the face with a keyboard, and it would have been basically wanted. Because I was high-fiving my coworkers. They were like, you got out, man, way to go. And then, yeah, that's where I got my start. I was a junior writer right around the very beginning of Jade Empire when they first ramped it up. And it's kind of been a steady climb from there.
So I guess I have a follow-up question to that then, if you don't mind.
Sure.
When will we see Jade Empire 2?
Everybody asks me that. Oh man. So I kind of love Jade Empire, right? Obviously I have a lot of skin in that game. I helped build that world. Obviously some of the work had been done before I got there, but just kind of realizing it, bringing it to life. I wrote the whole first kind of town and all that stuff. So, I mean, I would love to see it come back, but what you'll find is that essentially right now we're already running, if you think about it, 4 things, right? There's Secret IP, there's Andromeda, right? There's whatever the heck I'm working on, who even knows, related, creative director for Dragon Age. So who knows? And then we also have the team that's working on like adding the content for the Old Republic, right? The Star Wars MMO. So you kind of have 4 full things happening at BioWare. And so I think it's in a lot of ways kind of a question of bandwidth. At some point I hope the stars align. I'd love to. I think the world has a ton of cool stories to tell. But funnily, almost everybody who worked with me on Jade is part of the DA leadership team. Matt Goldman was our director on both the Dragon Age 2 and Inquisition, and on Jade. Mark Darrow was the lead programmer on Jade and is now the executive producer for the Dragon Age team. So, it's there's a lot of that talent still there. But it just, one of these days, I think the stars might align, but, who knows when.
Oh, that would be so cool.
We did just release it on iPad.
They
It's
did?
great.
No, they did actually, didn't they? I hadn't even thought about that.
Along with because that and Knights of the Old Republic, you've made mobile gaming feel like beefy, I guess.
Yeah.
Is a good word.
Yeah, those are good. You can get them and feel like they're in there. That said, there's ones that are like kind of mobile first that are still beefy, 80 Days, or the sorcery games like Inkle just puts out some really, really cool ones. And anytime Drax is like, oh, hey, by the way, we just happened to put all of XCOM onto your iPad. It's like, I'm good for plane flights then.
So like, you'll be able to get a Nintendo Switch, so it's fine.
There you go.
So I've got like a ton of questions swimming like around in my head, but I want to give somebody else a chance to ask. So before I ask a question, who wants to, like, does anybody want to go before me?
Yeah, I'll touch on something. Mike, you just mentioned that you guys have kind of these 4 different teams. I'm just curious, like, I know you guys have different studios. I don't know how much you can say in terms of what they're working on, but kind of how, I'm actually from Edmonton too, and I'm wondering, I guess, how do you work within the other studios? Do you guys kind of share efforts on single games, or I guess just kind of break down who works on what and how you guys collaborate? Because you guys must feel kind of cut off from the rest of the games industry all the way up here.
I mean, so it's interesting. There's kind of 2 tiers of collaboration. There's BioWare itself, which is like a studio family, and we're all beholden to Aaron Flynn, who again, Jade Empire's lead combat programmer. I think he was lead anyway, but certainly busted his ass. So Aaron kind of coordinates the 3 studios. That's Austin, Montreal, and Edmonton. Interesting. In Montreal, you have a pretty vibrant dev community, right? Ubisoft's there. You got Square teams there. And in Austin, there's a ton of game devs. So BioWare itself has all these feelers out to other groups and stuff. Edmonton, of course, a little more isolated, but we are lucky now that we have like the Trent's crew in Beamdog in town now, which is kind of cool. We know most of them. We know the tricks. Dave Gator. So what we do when we collaborate, though, is there's kind of two tiers. So you have direct working with other members of BioWare. So, for instance, the Descent DLC was primarily done by a full team in Austin. For Inquisition. We worked with level designers and combat designers who were out in Montreal, and they would kind of contribute. And what we do is we have full video chatting. We use like Skype for Business pretty regularly. We have really, really good conference call systems. And if we want to do like, we're going to play through a level, we're going to kind of do a critique of it and that kind of stuff, we'll conference call people in, and when we share share our desktop, like whoever's playing, both sides see it almost absolutely, seamlessly, no lag, no nothing. So there's systems designed to do that, so we can do call outs and have people kind of picture and stuff in. And then on top of that, there's always a value to some degree of face-to-face, right? I've flown down and given presentations to the Austin studio about, hey, here's some cool stuff we did with level design. I've gone out and done coaching with folks in Montreal. It's kind of like you build up this ecosystem, and you recognize there's always challenges whenever there's distance. It's harder than being able to spin in your chair and go like, hey, Bill, But the way I look at it is that it also means you get this variety of perspective, right? We get a lot more French-Canadian developers in Montreal because they're more comfortable there. It's a talent pool that doesn't have to move, so why should they? Being able to work with folks who are coming from the American talent pool in Austin, and they don't have to emigrate. They just go right to Austin. They're still part of BioWare. It's really, really cool. So in general, we try to keep each project to about 2 studios. So it's not like, it's all 3. That gets quite a bit more hairy. But that's essentially the key to collaboration, is being sure you've got good communication. I think the other side of it is really good vision, but really good understanding of what you're trying to achieve. So if you say to a group, hey, I want you to work on the multiplayer mode for Dragon Age, it's like they need to understand what the goals of that are. They need to understand what good looks like, what's a solid deliverable, and they need to know that they can escalate concerns directly where need be.
Too bad we don't have Steve here. He's still playing. Steve
Steve is literally still playing Dragon Age Inquisition.
That's what he's doing right now, probably.
Probably doing it right now. That's he's like Brandon on Overwatch. I'm not a huge multiplayer guy, but I finished Inquisition, and I would constantly ask, "Hey, Steve, man, dude, let's play some." No, man, I'm like a year later. No, I'm playing Dragon Age Inquisition online, bro. And I'm like, damn, son, it's like Brandon's love affair with Overwatch. Like, that's all Steve wants to play is Dragon Age Inquisition.
That's cool. I mean, it's kind of like what we were trying to build with it was essentially the feeling of like a raid, right? Like a small kind of co-op dungeon crawl that you could just drop into without the preamble and without having to grind for, potion materials.
Now, now that you mention that, I have played the online component, not as extensively as I played the single player, but I definitely see where you're coming from on that.
Yeah.
That's a very apt comparison. I wanted to bounce off of Jeff's question. So being at BioWare, like, how much cross-pollination is there between, like, for example, say, like, the Mass Effect team and the Dragon Age team? Like, do you guys, I don't know if the game runs on the same engine or not, but do you guys, like, what's it like sharing assets? Or do you ever have devs come over from the Mass Effect team, like, hey, we need your help on this particular combat scenario? Or, we could really use your advice on this particular storyboard. Like how often does that happen, and kind of at what level?
Pretty regularly. The way we've kind of structured our projects is, so when Inquisition finished, a large number of folks ramped down and moved, took some vacation, of course, because finishing a game is terrible.
Oh yeah.
And then they moved to Andromeda. Some others moved to Secret Project. And so you get kind of this like, hey, we learned a whole bunch of stuff, and we're going to spread that out. So, a team that was 200 might shrink down to like 25, 30 people, right? And so suddenly you have 100 plus people with experience and talent who are moving to the other projects. And the nice thing, sort of the nice thing, is that we just moved to the Frostbite engine, which is a shared kind of EA platform. It's the one that was originally built for Battlefield. But it was part of an initiative EA had, which is to say, we will make sure that this engine kind of works for everybody. And recently FIFA's moved to it. The Battlefield games continue to be there. We're there. Andromeda's moving to there. So we were the first ones to kind of say, well, we're going to build an RPG layer that will work in this engine that was originally a shooter engine. Now, thankfully, not our first rodeo, because it's exactly what we did with Unreal to make Mass Effect, right? Exactly that. But what had always happened is for a long time, Dragon Age and Mass Effect were working on 2 different tech tracks. We had the Eclipse engine, later the Lyrium engine, and Unreal 3. That meant that essentially certain programmers couldn't even jump between those tracks because there was proprietary information that we didn't even own. And designers would go from Eclipse, which was like a C-based engine, like for scripting. They would have to type it out and that kind of stuff. Suddenly they're over working with Kismet, which is visual, object-oriented, like drawing lines between boxes with pins and stuff, which are, the principles are the same, but the interface and the flow and the feel and learning all these functions completely new can be very challenging. So Inquisition was the first game to go onto Frostbite, which exponentially increases the complexity of building it, let me tell you. But in doing that, what we did is we kind of were able to build what we think of as kind of like a Bioware layer that becomes a portable, like here's how conversation can work, and here's how timelines work for cinematic presentation. And all of those can be shared to Andromeda, and those can be shared to other projects. And the end result then is when our devs move between it, they're able to take their knowledge, they're able to take the lessons they've learned and say, okay, we did this, we hit this problem. Here's how you overcome this one really nasty thing with memory. Here's how you can stream content in and out dynamically while covering a load. Here's how you can, et cetera, et cetera.
Do you have any of your guys working on Andromeda right now? You may not be able to answer that, but...
Well, they're Andromeda's folks now.
Oh, well, I guess so,
yeah, no, like a ton of the DA folks moved over to Andromeda.
Okay.
Really, really talented folks like Jason Hill built most of Skyhole, put together the barn. He's now down working on some element of space. Folks that were behind our multiplayer level design are now working down there. It's a ton of it. Production, audio, art, you name it. They're all contributing. In fact, I would say there is no division of Andromeda that doesn't have some of the Inquisition folks on it. That said, it also has people who haven't worked on Inquisition.
I would really love to be a fly on the wall.
I know.
Jeez. Okay, somebody else. I know somebody else has got some questions for.
I've got a question. If Mike is good, coming from a writing background and coming from the creation aspect from the story, have you latched onto a particular character in Dragon Age as just kind of your low key favorite?
Let's see. Wow, it's like,
who's your waifu?
Yeah,
just put it out there.
My wife. Okay, so I'd probably say if I've got a crush on one of them, it's Liliana. She's got cool character growth. I tend to like what I'm personally attracted to is women that are kind of strong and have a bit of an edge, that aren't pushovers, and she certainly hits all those notes. She's cute as well. She can be fun. She can be deadly. That's all cool. It's hard to not have affection for Varric, right? I think he, as a character, he resonated incredibly well. In a lot of ways, he's kind of the detached observer who's still got a lot of stake in things. So even though he's like wry, but genuinely affected by things that happen to him. I'd say those two probably leave out in terms of like kind of the major cast of characters. There's always a few that stand out. I know one that leaps out to me is kind of like the more minor characters, like weirdly old Tigran, the guy from Origins, who was like, find dwarven crabs, and just kept showing up. Basically ran out of random encounters. We're like, in the store there. Characters like that are really cool because they're kind of like, to me, he's kind of like that dude whose cart kept getting knocked over in the Avatar Last Airbender series.
Like cabbages.
Yeah, exactly. Who then goes on to, of course, found a massive corporation in Korra. So good for him.
Well, now I know you're cool because you just, quoted that. So good job.
Only
now.
The follow-up to that would be, are you able to pick a character that just didn't quite pan out the way you hoped, and if you could go back, become to be a little better?
That's a good question.
Yeah, a character we could go back and hit. Okay, two versions of that. So a character that can die, but may not die. That's a complicated right? A character that, and we literally just we have a field like in our internal documentation that just says quantum. Yes, no. Are they Schrodinger's character? So weirdly, Sir Barris from Inquisition, he was the kind of potential replacement Templar commander after the Templars kind of all went crazy and started huffing the Red Lyrium. a combination of him just being like remarkably well acted, handsome as all hell, and like competent, capable, stable, like stuff like that. Like he's the kind of character I'm like, man, that guy really worked, and like no one really expected him to. But unfortunately, he's quantum, which makes him kind of tricky to like. If we're going to do a sequel, who knows? It makes him hard to bring back because suddenly you have to account for what if there isn't a Cerberus? What if he's dead? So it creates challenges, and I mean, sometimes I wish I could go back and find characters that we made quantum and go, no, I really want you back. Can we just fix that? But once that gets enmeshed in, it becomes kind of a choice thing. And in his case, it was a skill test. Like if you could keep the central hull strong enough, if you kept kind of going back and forth, so it was kind of a soft timer, then he would survive. And if not, he would die terribly.
That's why he's survived for me.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think when I think about characters I wish, that we could have given a little more juice to, I think, fundamentally probably one of my biggest regrets is that we, and someone somewhere is going to go, yes, when I say this, is that I'm not happy with the decision we made, and this is on me. It's always on me when it's a bad decision. And blame it the creative director, is that we didn't let the Orsino-Meredith kind of conflict play out in the way I think it should have. I think we should have had one side or the other side kind of, the one you supported kind of stick with it. And the fact that Orsino in particular kind of was like, whatever, and just went crazy. I'm like, oh, God, that weakened his character. So, again, back call, my fault, always. Someone somewhere is going to have a GIF of me doing that. But it's just one of those things where you're like, man, that wasn't perfect. That's something I'd like to, and you have those in every creative endeavor where you're like, damn, but Celebi.
So while we're on the subject of the characters, I have a question, and then I want to throw it out to either Brandon or JT or Matt or Enrique, because you guys need to ask some questions too. While we're on the subject of characters, I wanted to bring up Dorian, who is the first openly gay character in the Dragon Age series, as far as I know. I have a close friend of mine who I grew up with, a childhood friend. He came out of the closet in his mid-20s. It was tough for him, but he was a huge nerd, just like me and the rest of my buddies, and he's a huge fan of the Dragon Age series, also the Mass Effect series. And when Inquisition came out, he really enjoyed the character of Dorian, because he said, he's gay, so obviously, he chooses to have a homosexual relationship in the Dragon Age series. But what he loved about Dorian was that it felt so much more natural, because the character is written as exclusively gay. And I thought that was really cool, and my friend reacted to it really well. He really and I was curious. What led to the concept of the character, and at what point during the dev cycle did you just say, okay, this is what we're going to do with this character?
So the way I approach romance in particular is we start not worrying about romance. We worry about interesting, cool characters. And what Dorian was brought into the game to represent essentially was a viewpoint on Tevinter that was not a bunch of mustache twirling madmen. Weirdly, he has a lovely mustache.
He does actually have a cool
he could twirl. Yeah. And yet he isn't, here's the thing, he's a sympathetic Tevinter. And I mean, that's something that I kind of try to bleed through all the stuff. And the writing team are excellent at this, is saying no one's just absolutely a villain. Some people might be villainous, but they tend to think they're doing the right thing. Loghain, I think, is probably our most successful version of that. But in the case of Tevinter, I didn't want the sense of, Tevinter is just a whole bunch of cackling nut bars, because a bunch of cackling nut bars, I don't think would resist if they couldn't cooperate, for instance, they wouldn't resist the Qunari as long as they have. They wouldn't, ignore the South. They'd do something really dumb, and they'd attack the South when the North was undefended, and blah, 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 blah. So that's the kind of thing where I'm like, we need to make sure that Tevinter isn't just the crazy old, Roman Empire in ruins. It's like, no, they should be vital. They should be representative of what we're doing. So we started there with him. And then Dave Gator picked him up as a character he wanted to write, because he got really excited about him. And Dave himself is gay. So he was like, would you mind if I kind of explored that and what it's like for Dorian to kind of struggle with his dad's disapproval and that kind of stuff. I said, dude, hey, that sounds killer. It sounds vulnerable, so be sure you're comfortable writing that kind of stuff. And Dave's like, yeah, I think I am. I think I really am.
What? That must have been such a challenge for him too, right?
I think so. I know he poured a lot of the quintessential Dave into it, but I mean, Dave's an exceptional writer, and he can evoke character in a way that a lot of people, I think, would envy. I certainly do. I am surrounded by writers who are better than I ever was at the pure writing part of it. So, lucky me. So he basically said, I would like to do this. I'd like to make it a romance. Are we okay with that? I said, well, you're the lead writer, man. I mean, you're the one who coordinates who gets romance. But generally speaking, I find it works best when the writers sort of pitch where they think the character could go, what they want to do with the character, because then I'm not saying, you who dislikes romantic subplots, get sexy, right? No one responds well to that. It's like, okay, right? So that's tricky. But yeah, he was a really great character, and I think I wanted to make it like I agreed with I think the people's feelings that everyone Dragon Age 2 is bi. That just feels a little easy, a little lazy.
Yeah.
The worst thing to tell a game dev when they've just stumbled across the finish line. But I get it. You know what I mean? Like lazy is a shorthand for unsatisfying, right? It's a shorter word to say that. And I do think that was a little unsatisfying. I felt a little like everybody was player sexual. And in this case, I think what we came up with was Dave saying like, I'd like to have characters that are just gay, right? And that not everybody has to be there for you. They can be there for them. And I said, yeah, I totally agree. So let's do that. And then he ran with it.
I want somebody to ask another question, but I want to follow. I just had something pop into my head. So, guys, if you don't mind,
Go for it.
Yeah, go ahead, man.
So, you just made me think of something really interesting, Mike. So, given the freedom that writers have with penning these characters and their dialogue, obviously your writers, like you work with them closely, their personalities. Do you ever like when you're playing the game, do you ever think to yourself, man, I see a lot of so-and-so in this character, right? Like obviously he poured a little bit of himself into Iron Bull, for example. Mm-hmm. Do you ever sit back and think, man, yeah, I really recognize aspects of my friend here in Cassandra, for example? Like how often does that happen?
Fairly often, and sometimes it's not like, oh, this is him, like this is her. It's not necessarily that. You sometimes see that, and sometimes you're like, oh, I think you're just doing that person over there. I think you kind of have picked up aspects of someone that you've observed, and you're like, oh, you would make a great character if kind of dialed up a few notches, and I do see that. The team informed me very quietly that Varric is largely based on me, so that's an example. Just kind of because I would come in and be like, no, I want this guy who's like just telling the story and he's like bombastic, and they're like, cool, we're going to do that. That thing you're doing, we're going to do that. So Mary, who wrote Varric, was like, no, he's pretty much just you, dude. And I'm like, oh. And I totally didn't see it until she told me, and now and then Matt Rhodes, who's one of our senior concept artists, is like, yeah, whenever I drew him, it was basically just you pitching the story to us. I just drew whatever you were doing, and I'm like, oh, fuck off. Thanks, guys. So we've seen that. We see every once in a while you see someone who writes someone who's like completely outside of their experience. Luke Christensen, who's kind of like BioWare's writer one, he wrote like most of Baldur's Gate 1, Minsk and Jaheira in that era. He's written on almost everything up until then. All the Mass Effects. He was on Jade with me. So Luke tends to write characters that are deliberately outside of his spectrum, right? So he tackled Sarah, who in no way represents Luke, but is a character he really wanted to explore. What's someone who's maybe a little too young to understand the gravitas of what's happening? What's her response to what's going on? So again, he had a very specific goal he wanted to tackle.
That's so cool. Thanks for answering, man. That's really fucking cool. This whole thing is cool. I'm learning so much. Like this is freaking insane. All right, I've got more questions, but I want somebody. I don't want to hog everything. So somebody else throw a question out to Mike. I know we've got.
I was going to delve into some fan questions.
Oh, dude, let's do it, man.
I got a quick question though. Quick question.
Oh, okay. So hey, we'll do Enrique's question, JT, and then I want you to get into some Twitter questions.
Cool.
All right.
Yeah. So, Mike, out of all the games you've worked on, I mean, you've worked on some amazing games: Dragon Age, Jade Empire, Mass Effect.
Mm-hmm.
Out of all those games that you've worked on, what's been your most memorable of all the games that you've had a hand in?
I'd say Jade. All new universe. Very, very, I guess, challenging time for us because it was the first time we tried to develop our own IP. And some of the stuff that we did in terms of like building a world is stuff the Mass Effect team looked at and said, "Oh, we're gonna take some of your notes and we're gonna do better or worse than that. Usually better. It was one of those things where it was like, okay, what if we didn't do a D&D game? What if we didn't do a Star Wars game? How would we do that?" And it was my first game. And, you always remember your first time. And it was hard. Like, it was genuinely hard. It was a console first game, which was challenging as all heck for a PC studio. It was an action game for a studio that had only ever done pure RPGs. It was the first time that we'd cast and done our own full voiceover. Knights of the Republic was done all by LucasArts. So we hadn't handled that part of it. So I had to work with I had to work with Sean and Perry, who was kind of our director of voice and production at the time, to kind of figure out how are we even going to do this? How are we going to print scripts that actors can read? How are we going to organize our conversations so that they make sense when an actor reads them and stuff? So it was funny because right there, I kind of figured out that while I think I'm an okay writer, I'm surrounded by like exceptional writers. And so I realized I had more of a talent to kind of help coordinate and arrange that kind of stuff. So I think that's the game that kind of pushed me into my career path. So yeah, it's a big memorable deal. And also I got to design Lord Lau's furnace, which was a big
Nice. Okay, all right. JT, why don't you launch into some questions from Twitter, man? And I've got a few more read. I know other, but we'll take a break and we'll do some.
Yeah, I don't want to break this up, but I also want to make sure
please.
our fans get their questions answered too.
Let's do it.
They asked some really good questions.
Anybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Stop interrupting.
All right, so Sam Tolbert, who is actually a member of our sister podcast, BROP, little plug there. He asks, what are the main influences for Dragon Age? More just for personally, like what is your main influence when you created this world? And I guess what are some of the team's main influences just in general?
Well, let's see. It'd be a disservice to say that there's no reference to I would say Baldur's Gate, but honestly the whole Infinity Engine pile of games, right? Planescape Torment's in there, the Icewind Dale games are in there, Baldur's Gate for sure. Trying to kind of recapture that feeling, and that's something that has been a really interesting challenge as we've been on consoles and stuff. Kind of in terms of like gaming style and that kind of thing. It's something that is still to me an alchemy that we're trying to chase down. Like, how do we get that excellent mix of real time and yet still highly tactical? And I think Inquisition moved to a better place for both console and PC than Dragon Age 2, but didn't get to where PC was on Origins, right? Like there's still work to be done there. I have high hopes I will be able to pursue that with a talented team, but whatever. In terms of like world building and kind of lore and stuff like that, I think big parts of it are kind of like history, looking at history through like a different lens. Like, okay, what were some real things that happened? But I think more importantly, when you look at history, you can tend to see like causality. Now, some of that, and it's important to note, is just ascribed by historians, right? Like, oh, well, this is why it happened because we think so, or because the victors wrote it that way. So they were bad, therefore we won. Which is it's human nature to look at stories that way. But we try to look at it and say, how does geography play into the world that we have? How do ongoing conflicts play into the world we have? How does human motivation and kind of that natural self-centered sense of things play into things? So, for instance, the Chantry, is predicated upon and founded as a result of essentially a crusade against the Tifinagh Empire, right? This upswell of people in the south marching against their, let's call them Roman overlords, to try and beat back slavery and just this overwhelming sense of power, and winning. And then the Chantry spawns out of it, the teachings of Andraste. And the Chantry is like one of its major precepts is, what's bad? Magic. Well, where did that come from? Well, it obviously came from the fact that the religion itself was founded out of a conflict against people who primarily use magic. So there's a lot of work that we try to do to make that stuff make sense, to make it trace back and feel like the motivations are human. And to make sure that we also never present anything as like, this is absolute fact. If you buy like the World of Thetis books, which are kind of lore books, there's no solid, like, this is how Dragon Age works. This is what the Fade is. Instead, there's, based on scholars, Brother Genetivi writes that, et cetera, et cetera. It's always from perspective and points of view, which we think grounds it a lot more and makes things, not like, it's not like, oh, magic isn't real. It's like, no, it's there, it's real, but people don't necessarily understand it. We want the players to be in that same space where there are questions to be asked and answered. In terms of fiction and stuff, I think it's good to look at, obviously Game of Thrones, huge impact. Fantasy, in general. Obviously, we're trying to play with tropes. These are familiar works like Tolkien, but our elves are different and this and that. And I mean, we're not alone in that. Lots of worlds and stuff do that. But I think that in a lot of ways, it's really cool to say, you know, this is a world with its own set of consistent rules that is recognizably fantasy. So it's easy to get into, but where it's different is where it gets interesting.
Awesome.
That's cool. Yeah, I mean that's one of the biggest things that I love about Dragon Age is the coherent world, and you actually feel like, hey, this is plausible. This feels good to just get lost in this world. Like I could have lived here, you know, back in those times.
Yeah.
So
I would have been fine without like all the monsters running around and all the dragons flying around. But other than that, I totally. JT, we got any more? I know we've got some more Twitter questions, man. Why don't you pop another one out there?
We got a whole lot of Twitter questions. A little bit more of an interesting. Michael Moreau asks, can you give us an idea? You probably can't so much, but maybe talk in generalizations. Can you give us an idea of where the franchise is going, or what you personally want to see from it going forward?
That's interesting. Okay, I can speak in generalizations for sure. I think you know, if I have kind of a creative plan for Dragon Age, it's kind of twofold. It's that you should be able to look at, you know, previous games and get a sense of how future games connect. We always try to look about 3 games ahead. To say, okay, well, where could we go? What are the interesting storylines? And we never really seal off the world. You know, you never say, good, we've resolved all the issues. And I know that frustrates some people immensely. They're like, well, why won't you just tell us all the answers? And why do you introduce new conflict? I'm like, because most of us GM'd games, you know, played D&D around the table. And the thing is, you never quite wrap it up. Otherwise, your campaign's done. Right? Like, yeah, we stopped evil. All evil. It's done. Okay, well, I guess it's always some retirement.
I just had an image of like killing Corypheus at the end of Inquisition, and then the Inquisitor just looks at the screen and says, "We stopped evil." And that's it. Like that's the end of the game.
No. High five with Cassandra, freeze frame, and then the credits roll. So that's kind of the space. So I do try to look at that. But the thing that I enjoy, that I think is kind of cool, is being able to not only use the games, but also take the extra stuff around the games, which are by no means like mandatory reading, but like the novels. How do they tie in? How could the comics make sense? How could the comics present interesting stuff? Like we used Mage Killer, our most recent comic series, to kind of explore what were people doing around the Inquisition when the Inquisitor was, you know, bestriding the earth and so on, which is where Marius and Tessa come in as characters that are like, oh, they're interesting. They provide a different point of view. They team up with Sutherland, who was kind of that fun little side plot in Skyhold where you were sending a group of adventurers out and questing them. And so we want to explore that, but the nice thing is that also opens up avenue for us to tell other stories with our comics to say, hey, what else was the Inquisition up to? So in the next series, might be worth keeping an eye out, seeing maybe if it has any hints. And generally speaking, anything we do tends to have hints about other stuff that's going to be coming. You know, and people kind of wonder. There are other slightly more explicit examples, like the end of Trespasser, the DLC for Inquisition, which suggested certain things that might perhaps possibly come in the future. Maybe. So there is that. But I think in terms of other stuff, like the other thing I could talk about is like, you know, well, what's potentially in the future is, again, hyper theoretical. Who even knows? But if we do tackle it, some things that I would put on my wish list would be, I would still want to continue iteration on combat. I think we got it to a better place for Inquisition, but it's nowhere near done. I think there's a lot of stuff we can do. I'd actually like to see more emphasis on teamwork. I like to see the fact that we one of the few RPGs actually has the full-blown team in the HD space that we're like, well, let's own that. Let's go further with that. I think that would be very cool. I also think, you know, and some people may wonder if I'm aware of this critique. I am, that we could probably do open world better. We could probably have more meaningful side quests, for instance. And that for sure is something that you know, we're well aware of. And I mean, I saw someone in the chat going, does Mike like Witcher? I'm like, hell yeah, Witcher's amazing. And Witcher 3 is like, it's a masterclass in just developing that kind of like side content. And I think one of the things that do so well, just to give props to that team, is they kind of very early on established like 4 kind of main narrative threads, and they just work all their side quests to kind of reinforce them. Like, there was a war, you hunt monsters, Ciri is missing, and probably each zone kind of has its own thematic stuff. Like there was a battle here just recently. And kind of like, it's like, here's a side quest, but it reinforces that idea of you hunt monsters. Oh yeah, all the Witcher contracts do that. Almost any peasant who's like, my lord, could you help me with my pot and pan because it's trapped in my house? Is like, what do you discover? Well, someone used the pot's blackened stuff to make ink that they used to send a missive because they're a spy because there was a war here recently. Like, I love that. It was incredibly well executed. And I feel like having overcome build a new engine, ship on 5 different platforms if you count the older generations of Xbox, and you should because that was a lot of work. And figure out open world at all. It's kind of like I feel like there's room to refine rather than having to re-engineer. So, in theory, maybe, sorta, that would give you a sense of the kind of stuff that would be on my mind were I going to be working on another Dragon Age.
Nice dodge at the end.
Thanks, man.
That was masterclass. I do want to point out to all our Witcher fans in chat that Dragon Age has better combat than The Witcher 3.
All right, I wasn't going to ask. We got plenty of questions on that.
Well, Mike, bye.
To be fair,
good, guys. See you later. Good luck with that.
To be fair, Pong has better combat than The Witcher 3, but I'm just.
Oh my gosh.
That was for you, Enrique. That was for you.
I'll give you Dark Souls 3.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think
one more question.
Yeah,
kind of tie into what you've been talking about during this whole entire thing, Mike. You said earlier that you kind of hate seeing a character go to not waste, but not really knowing what to do with them. Do you think that having a set goal of what you want to do with a character going forward, do you think that will play into how you will write your future characters? Like, having because you said you always think 3 games ahead. Do you think that any future characters will be kind of written in a way that they aren't ambiguous?
So quantum, right? In terms of like how can they change or not? It's a tough one. Here's the thing: is I don't think, and in fact, I know that we shouldn't be afraid of putting characters in a quantum state, right? A character potentially dying or surviving and so on and so forth is an incredibly strong way to give consequence to decision, right? It's like, oh, this character could live, this character could die. Like the fact that Alistair shown back up in all the moments, right? Even in Awakening, based on any number of possible Alistair outcomes, is powerful because it's a reminder of like, oh man, even 2 games ago I made that guy king, and here he just showed up as king. Like that's pretty cool and satisfying. The problem is the more quantum a character is, and Alistair has 77 different possible states when you multiply them all. Is that it becomes hard to make a satisfying payoff for that. So you have to be careful where you do it, and you have to, you tend to lean towards the major characters and so on and so forth. And you always run the risk of like, oh, this voice actor is currently in a major motion picture and doesn't have time and that kind of stuff. So there's always a few issues, but in terms of it, I'm comfortable being fairly fearless with characters because of the nature of Dragon Age in terms of it being a story of a place and a time rather than a story of necessarily an individual character, right? Like it's not like the Inquisitor's best buds keep coming back, or Hawk is like, again, the major characters. We absolutely have to have Isabella come back. Like we can say, well, it's a new story, it's a new place, new time. So we aren't as beholden.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. So again, I think it's something where you look at and balance it. But if a writer pitches me an incredibly compelling reason a character might die, especially if the player kind of feels like, "Oh, good lord," then that to me can be really valuable, really satisfying.
Okay,
cool.
All right, that's
all right. I'll kind of pass the baton. Just kind
great fucking answers. This is this is cool because we're getting insight into something that not a lot of gamers normally get, and so I'm glad we got so many people watching right now. This is fascinating. I know. Torpedo Vegas over here had a question. So Torpedo, why don't you take it away?
Sorry if there's any feedback. I don't know what's going on with my mic.
No, Torpedo Vegas. We can hear Torpedo
Vegas. My question, going off of what you said about Witcher and inspiration for side quests and stuff like that. Are there any other games, open world or not, that you have played since Inquisition has come out that has really just fueled your creative fires with things that you'd like to implement maybe?
Oof, man.
Ooh.
That's
Damn, that's
such
legit.
a smorgasbord of good games recently, right? So it's one of those like here's the thing. So let me more say stuff that I think is cool, which is separate from stuff that I would necessarily implement, because I don't think every feature is the right thing for every game. So for instance, Deus Ex, like Human Revolution and Mankind Divided, I think do an exceptional job of multipathing through levels, right? You can be sneaky, you can fight, you can move boxes, climb on them, you can use the hydraulic legs to jump higher. So all those things open up new routes. And that's super, super cool. I love playing it. I love feeling like my Adam Jensen is like Captain Avoidance as opposed to Captain Stealth, like with the cloaking and all that kind of stuff, versus run and gun, right? And like, wow, those feel really, really different. But I don't necessarily mean that is like, oh, well, that's something that definitely would be in the next Dragon Age if we do one, because here's the thing. When you have a party, you're building a very fundamentally different game, right? Like, it's like, well, can everybody have hydraulic legs? If so, am I special? Blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, there's some things that work better with single characters. There's some things that work better with parties and some that work better in different genres. So, you know, stuff that I think that's cool recently. So, obviously, I thought Witcher was amazing. I really enjoyed Deus Ex. I have, let's see, what have I been playing recently? I am super stoked for Dishonored. Right, the Dishonored one was just an exceptional kind of. I played it sneaky, I played it pacifist, and I guess someone got eaten by rats, which was a bummer because I didn't get the achievement. I have also been really enjoying some of the ways that games like you see it in Pillars of Eternity, you see it in Shadowrun, like Hong Kong. More recently, where they have a really, really strong dedication to what I would call complication, right? So you're in a plot, you're doing a thing, and oh God, it never quite turns out to be what you think it's going to be. There's always a twist. There's always like, oh, can you go kill those lizard men? And then you go and you find out the lizard men are actually a bunch of polymorph peasants that the guy's house is trying to steal. And oh, I should probably not kill the lizard man, but do I want to go kill that guy? Like, I love that kind of twist and complication that forces you to kind of, you know, reevaluate your choices as you go. And I think we have those in DA, but again, that's where some of the side plots fell down, is they were like, please find me some pants. Here's your pants, you know, hardly compelling. But at the same time, you know, there's other ones that are like more elaborate in terms of like, oh, the Templars are on my side and they appear in this, and now the mages are in the attack on Haven, and so on and so forth. So, you know, what else? There's probably, I think if there's one thing I'd love to see, it would be a better sense of, and I honestly have no idea how I would do this necessarily or how we would tackle it, but I mean, it'd be really cool if there was some way to have more of that social sense without necessarily having to go full multiplayer. Like when I think about the note systems in the Dark Souls games, I love those. I think they're fantastic, right? It's like other people were here. Sometimes I see their ghostly apparitions, like, and they build their entire game around that being a sensible kind of scenario. And I would love to feel like I'm playing this game and it's my game and it's still single player, because single player lets you do some stuff that in terms of like, you know, world division, you know, hey, my world's flooded, yours isn't, that's weird. But we can do stuff like that. But being able to sense like, oh, cool, you know, because your Inquisitor did the thing here, I see something, spot something, unlock something. Like, I'd love to do more stuff like that. And I think, you know, there's so much more connectedness than there was back in like the Origins days. It's just so much easier for us to achieve. The question is how. What metaphor would support it, and so on and so forth.
Hey, Mike, we've actually got a really interesting question from chat that I wanted to throw at you. Sotnest asks, he asks, and this is really fascinating. Do you think that the rest of the industry has reached a similar equilibrium with engine development and can focus on refinement too? Is this the gen where conceptualization can finally take center stage?
That's a damn good question. I would say. Okay, so what I think we're seeing is that we're seeing visual fidelity reach the point where it is approaching, I would say, a really, really strong stylized realism, if that makes sense. Like, it's characters move, hair moves, clothing flows. There's still minor improvements to be made there, but we're at the point where we're essentially we're making tiny incremental games as opposed to generational leaps like you saw from like PS1 to PS2. right? Like night and day. Wow, characters can have fingers, right? Like levels of change like that. So we're well past that. And I would say that because of that, and especially I think also being driven by just the sheer number of indie games exploring different gameplay styles, right? Overland is very easily looked at as something that's kind of almost a lo-fi version of XCOM. And yet it's remarkably well designed. It's an incredible, tale of survival. But again, it isn't pushing for visual fidelity, but it is delivering an incredibly intense experience. And we're seeing that, better visual fidelity is not the only way to achieve emotional impact and player engagement. So I think we have indies kind of saying, hey, y'all, you don't have to push that far. And then you have games like, your Titanfalls and Battlefield 1s, which are like, oh, wow, that almost looks real. So yeah, I think we're moving to a point where not only is there refinement, but I think you're going to see a broadening of experience in terms of like what kind of stuff you can do. If you even just look back, like what's come out over the past year, like one of my remarkably weird habits is I'm at the bottom of the Steam discovery queue, by which I mean I've scraped the barrel entirely. Like there is never anything for me to see. I click and I see about 5 games because they came out today, and most are really quite interesting down there. But the thing is, because I kind of look to see like what came out on Steam.
Sterling's YouTube channel.
Yeah. And it's like, you viewed 11,000 games on Steam, I think is where I'm at now. And it's like, okay, there's a lot of stuff out there and it's really broad. And I think what excites me is what I'm seeing is genres getting revitalized, right? If you think you've got Everspace and Elite Dangerous and Star Citizen and what's the new one from Rocksteady? Oh no, that's Everspace, I think. But you've got suddenly you have all these flight sims in space, all competing kind of for like to be fair, not the hugest market share, but like a hardcore enthusiast market share. And 10 years ago there were none, right? After Free Space 2, was there anything for like a decade? And suddenly we're back, and that's what I love is seeing the amount of games and the breadth of games broaden.
Wow, that was a hell of a question and a hell of an answer. Like that, it's almost a shame that it's not almost a shame. It's a real shame that Steve isn't here right now. Because Steve is the smartest man on the podcast, and every podcast he drops like this one knowledge bomb that like leaves the rest of our heads spinning, and he's not here. So we have like I'm trying to unpack that. It's Jesus. That's fascinating. We actually have another question in chat that I want to get to in a minute. Just as good as the last one we asked. But I wanted to ask who else on the panel has a question for Mike?
I guess I'll ask one.
Matt, let's hear it, dude.
So with Mass Effect 3 and Inquisition, they both kind of had these final DLCs that were kind of a culmination of everything that you had done with your team. So like with Citadel, it was a send-off to those characters that we'd known for 3 games. And then Trespasser was the kind of the finale to the Inquisition story arc. Was that always the intent to like build and build and build to these final like very closure-based DLCs, or did it just kind of evolve that way over time?
Yeah, it was not the intent at all. I know Citadel was okay. So you know what? Here's the thing: the common element between the two is Patrick Weeks. If you guys are familiar with him, he's now the lead writer for Dragon Age. He wrote on Mass 2. I don't know if he finished Mass 1. I'm trying to remember. But like Patrick just has this. He loves bittersweet. That's kind of like, Gator just kind of likes bitter, but Patrick loves bittersweet. And in a way, both of those I think kind of spring from his mind, and obviously the team and that kind of stuff. But what happened with Citadel was essentially this feeling like the trilogy had ended. And the story was over, but the Casey had given direction like I'd like to continue and have a few DLCs, and of course there was the whole extended cut, right, to kind of beef up the ending and stuff. But I mean, what they were saying as feedback, even from extended cut, was like, I just love these characters so much. And so Patrick kind of pitched the idea of, well, what if we did a story that's fundamentally about friendship, right? Because I'm going to spoil Citadel, and I'm sorry for folks who haven't played it, but like not too much. But essentially in Citadel, what you have is you have a shepherd who doesn't have friends, and you have a shepherd who has close friends, right? Like that's the two sides of the coin that you see. Your antagonist is essentially fierce independence as opposed to cooperation and trust. And running with that theme kind of felt like a great way to kind of build to like this ending of friendship that would kind of satisfy that that urge for the characters to really be front and center. So it was pitched as this adventure around this, and then the idea of the party and building to the party and hanging out with everybody kind of got added on. It kind of grew and grew, but the team, as I understand it, I wasn't on it, got really excited about it and poured a lot of passion into it. The mirror shepherd fight was a friggin' nightmare, right? Because it was 6 separate fights, because each of the shepherds had different abilities and different skill set. Oh, this one stealths while that one charges, right? Like those are night and day. So you had that kind of stuff play out, and when we were going through and we'd done Inquisition, we kind of wrapped it up, and we were staring off in the distance. The thing that we did have a plan to is it would be nice to, when we finish, kind of point a direction, like where are we going to head? Presuming there's another game coming, where would it go? What hints can we give the players? How can we kind of get them a little interested? And then I think what evolved was, another closure story might be a really, really good call, because we want to do it. And the thing that was powerful for us was being able to say, what would this look like 2 years later? What would this look like after things had happened? Because if the whole game was about power corrupting, could we play with that theme in your organization? And of course, you're constantly being compromised by enemy spies. My favorite moment is Solus going, "Oh well, the reason I knew about the Canary is because my spies found the Canary spies." And you had a lot of spies, son. And that kind of played to the idea of power, corruption, organization, and where is the responsible use of it, and what does an organization do when it's called to solve a problem, and then it turns out it defeated evil.
Always a good thing.
Oh yeah.
So you just mentioned the Canary, and I have to mention real quick, because you said Canary, all of a sudden Iron Bull flashed in my head. Mm-hmm. When I found out that Freddie Prinze Jr. was the voice of Iron Bull, I was like, "What?
Are you serious? I didn't know that."
You didn't know that, dude? Yeah, dude. Freddie Prinze Jr. was Iron Bull. And I had no idea until I finished the game and I saw the credits. And so I was wondering what is the audition process like? Like you guys just say, "Okay, I want Freddie Prinze Jr." Or was he one among many actors who came in and actually auditioned for the role? Because I have no idea what goes into that process at all.
Sure.
So I'm sorry if that sounds like a dumb question. It probably is, but
I want to chime in real quick.
About it, so sure, yeah, go.
I want to chime in real quick regarding voice acting. The Elusive Man is probably my favorite character in Mass Effect 2. Mm-hmm. And when I realized it was Martin Sheen voicing him, I was just floored. I was so floored. I mean, how cool was it to have Martin Sheen work on that game and do the voice acting for it?
All right, I'll tackle both. Okay, when we do general audition calls, we will tend to put out okay, so here's a role, here's a concept. Usually when we put them out, we're kind of look, this is the role we're looking for. This is kind of what we're doing. And there's guidance in there, use your natural voice. We tend to not want people affecting an accent and that kind of stuff. Those can be risky. It can be done, but you have to be very careful about it. Generally what we're looking for is a really strong performer who can emote well and basically act well. So, don't give me a gimmick. Don't Donald Duck your voice or anything like that. I don't know where we cast that for, but so we do general calls. There are some characters where the writer or the creative team in some way has said, we kind of had this person in our mind as someone who might fit that. Could we reach out to them? And on occasion we'll reach out to their audience and say, okay, so. Or not their audience. Their audience would probably say yes, but their agent would say, "Hey, is this available? What's the pricing like?" Because some actors, if they've been in movies and stuff, they're like, "Look, I'm not really into voice work, so sure, I'll do it for $1 billion." You're like, we don't have that. And usually they're very nice about it, but they're just like, it's not really my jam. In the case of other actors, we'll use the two specific examples. Like Martin Sheen, as I understand it, again, I wasn't directly involved in that casting, but as I understand it, he was just kind of intrigued, oh. Well, I'm a consummate professional, and I've never done that. That sounds interesting. And so he kind of said to his agent, sure, I'd like to give that a try. It's new. I haven't done that much voice work, and I certainly haven't done video game voice work, so sure, let's give it a try. And so he came in, and with an actor of his caliber, you tend to do tight sessions. You try to make sure his stuff is absolutely golden before you do it, because you don't want to hey Martin, can you just pop back in for a couple pickups? He'll do it.
make sure you got a bowl of like green M&Ms with just green M&Ms in the trailer and stuff like that.
No. He's not like that. That's the thing. He's not like that. In fact, most of the actors I've worked with have been just spot on, kind of enthused. Usually like, oh, this is kind of cool.
That's cool.
And in his case, I mean, one of the most notable things, and I mean, to his credit, a handwritten letter saying, thank you so much for the opportunity to appear in your games. After Mass Effect 3 was sent to our director, Caroline Livingstone, Livingstone. And he was just like, this was amazing. And I mean, what a classy guy, right? And I'm just like, oh, well, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm like, wow, you are a class guy. So that in the case of Freddie Prinze Jr., he's a gamer. He likes our games. He heard we were doing Mass Effect and ended up kind of like, I think he reached out to us and was like, hey, could I possibly get involved in Mass Effect 3? So he ended up as Vega, the big muscly lat dude. And so he did that. And of course we were like, man, he's great. Not only is he great, but he's fun, he's funny, he's amenable, he likes games, he's into it, he digs like the multilinear stuff. So he's great to work with. And then in his case, we were like, hey, we've been looking at some stuff. And he was like, well, you've got this one character. Could I try him out? And we were like, yeah, sure, let's see. Because we were like, but he was just Vega. Is Bull that different from Vega? And then suddenly, out of nowhere, he's like, let me tell you, Inquisitor. And we're like, where the hell did that come from? Like, it's a completely different voice.
I never in a million years would have guessed it was him until I read it on the internet. Yeah.
Whereas Vega kind of sounds like him. He's just kind of, up the Puerto Rican-ish, right? As he jokingly told me one day, oh, I'm Puerto Rican. And, he was kind of finding the voice and exploring it. And apparently now, whenever he orders Chinese food, he uses the Iron Bull voice.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So, like, he's a big gamer. Like, he has his own Twitch streams. The first game he Twitch streamed was Dragon Age Inquisition multiplayer. Like, I'm like, man, the guy's into it, and he's just like, I love your games. Let's do this. So, it's
cool.
funny.
Yeah, that is. I know I've got like a picture of him like ordering Chinese and then saying, "All right, boss, see you soon."
Yeah,
like,
pretty much.
Yeah. Mike, I just want to throw it out there. If you guys need a voice actor for the next Dragon Age game, I work for free.
No.
I do a great Christopher Walken impression. So, like,
are you going to do it tonight, John?
No, please don't.
I think everyone has a Christopher Walken.
Yeah, I don't. Tonight,
I very proudly do not.
If you need a villain who sounds like Christopher Walken, I'm your man. So,
okay, so here's the nuts thing. When we're developing the game, we use text-to-speech currently. And so text-to-speech, for again, the not all that critical. If it's a really critical thing, we might get scratch track, we might get a local actor to kind of perform it out to make sure it feels right. But the text-to-speach will take, like, the investigate hubs, tell me about pants, tell me about the Inquisition and stuff. And text-to-speech will just take the words and automatically populate it. And it tends to do a really good job. The weird thing is it can get like Tevinter, no problem, but it says midges every time. And it's like, oh, why are you getting that wrong? But there's the one we use has like a suite of like 12 voices, and one of them, I swear to God, is basically the Christopher Walken read, and it's we're like, well, Corypheus will sound like Christopher Walken. So a villain who sounds like Christopher Walken, done deal.
Please release a mod that makes
Corypheus
sound like Christopher Walken. Oh man,
we have to because it's a proprietary software, and we can't like publish that.
I would replay the entire game just to hear Corypheus talking to me as Christopher Walken. Yeah, that would be amazing. That would be amazing. Okay, who else has got a question? Who else has got a question? Brandon, what about you, man? You got anything you want to ask?
Not really, no.
Brandon's just
I've been enjoying the conversation. It's been good.
Brandon's just I have a question.
Okay, let's hear. All right, Torpedo Vegas. Let's hear it.
Torpedo Vegas.
Well, I mean, earlier, Mike, you mentioned how much you enjoyed Deus Ex, Mankind Divided. Have there been what other games in 2016 have you found to be like just personal favorites of yours?
Oh man. Okay. Let me pull up the old overloaded Steam drive here and see which ones have stuck out. All right. Huge fan of like colony builders and like management sims. So RimWorld, which released kind of for real on Steam just recently, is amazing. It's kind of like a no verticality, but other than that, it's pretty much a sort of a modernization of like the Dwarven Fortress kind of feel, where you've got intense desires and needs and conflicts and that kind of stuff coming out, along with like build a base and defend it, right? Which is, you know, just human nature. I love that. I've been really digging Planet Coaster. I haven't dug into it as much as I want to, but it just hit beta, and it's by the same folks who do Frontier, the folks who do Elite Dangerous, and it's kind of like that theme park tycoon kind of build and go. Let's see what else. Overwatch is amazing. I'm not
goddamn right it is.
You just made
not a huge competitive shooter guy, but holy crap, like that one's fun even when you're losing, right? I don't know, maybe just because Reinhardt goes oh in the most satisfying way.
Because you can still get play of the game, even if you lose, you can still get play a game and feel good about yourself.
The best part
It's
about
true.
Overwatch are all the gifts, all the play of the game gifts. I'm sorry, I love Overwatch, but there's the one where it's you know, play the game as Hanzo, and then there's the dude with the compound bow chasing the trail in the field, and then you hear Hanzo go, "Do that!" He yells in Japan, and the guy just throws the bow. Oh, that's the best. That is the best part about Overwatch.
I gotta go back and find those. I'll link it to you later.
Yeah, they're amazing. They're absolutely amazing. I didn't mean to interrupt, man. I just had to.
My list goes on and on. Sunless Sea, amazing narrative, and I've been a huge fan of the Fallen London guys and the folks at Fell Better Games. We partnered up with them to do an extension for DAI for the Keep. They're just smart writers with amazing world builders. Good friends too. So, you know, I have to disclose that. The new Hitman, I think, really got back to its roots. It reminds me of Blood Money, especially now that it's a complete experience. The challenge mode's like, can you do it without getting spotted? Can you do it wearing only a bird costume? Like all that kind of stuff's cool. What else? Dark Souls 3, spectacular. I think that's this year.
There we go.
My original Demon Souls playthrough was on a disc imported from China because for some unknown reason it had the full English VO and English UIs in the no region locked China disc. Okay, great. Came out like a year before the original Demon Souls did here. Yeah, I don't know, man. There's so many. I play a lot of games whenever I can because it's so good. Like, oh, what else leaps out of me? Transistors a few years back.
What a great
I need to play Doom. I really need to play Doom.
Yeah, you do.
Yes, you do.
I keep hearing amazing things about it. So.
Yeah.
One of these days.
It's a top contender for Game of the Year for sure.
Oh yeah,
it's
up there, man. It's definitely up there.
And I guess just a quick follow-up to that, because it's always fun to hear the other side without not even just calling out specific titles. Is there a genre of gaming that you're just not that big on? Like, for me, I'm just not a big sports fan guy unless it's like the arcadey sports, but...
Yeah, no, sports and racing are my two blind spots. I've never really chewed in on any of the sports games. I was very much in the hardcore nerd camp as a kid, so I never played any kind of team sports. So, I can look at the FIFAs and admire, the fidelity and the animation and the new story mode's really cool and stuff like that. But it's not a game for me because I don't really have a lot of heart in football/soccer. Similar with Madden, right? Amazing games, and I think great football sims, but they're not really my jam. Racing,
they used to be easier to get into.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
I've actually talked to the Madden team. They have some pretty excellent work on kind of onboarding and helping you kind of understand the game better in the more recent, the past couple, to the point where I almost feel like given the complexity of like things like our tactical mode and stuff, that I almost want to talk to them and say like, teach us senpai. How do you teach people how to play football? Because the thing is, we have to do like combat and tactical stuff. Those would be my two blind spots, and I don't think that hurts my day job too much, because I play if it's got a story or management or progression, man, I'm in. My man. Mike. We're getting to the end. I promise, man. I know we're bombarding you with questions. You've been more than patient. I've done 14-hour press days. You just.
We won't go that long. I promise.
No, we're not gonna go that long. We got a really good question in chat. B Money, actually, also from our sister podcast, the Basement Radio Arcade podcast, of which Enrique is the the founder of that. He asked, did you feel limited with what you could do with Dragon Age Inquisition since it was released across gens? And how do you feel about the mid-gen upgrades that are coming, and how does that affect development?
So, first part, yes, absolutely. I mean, all games have limitations. They're all challenging to build because you always have memory. You always have, even simple stuff like how quickly can you get a texture from the disk into memory, right? Even if you have all the memory in the world, you still have load times. So all of those things provide limits. But to be absolutely blunt, when you have kind of a block of systems that are weaker, in terms of like how much memory they have, their I/O speed, even disk read speed and stuff, it does create a difference. So one of the big examples would be the number of creatures that we could afford to have on screen, because the newer generation of consoles could have put more creatures on screen. It could have put more lively, bustling characters in towns. It could have done that for sure. But the moment you say, oh, well, that's cool, we're just going to add a crap ton more people, you've created a divergence in the content. And now you've created 2 testing streams, right? So now your QA team, who are always busting their butts, now has to test this level in this version. They have to test this level in this version, which doubles the amount of passes. And they go through that stuff every single day. So now you almost need to double the team. It's not quite that bad because systems tend to share. But if you're like, oh, good, this encounter is balanced right now, but it has 16 characters fighting you, whereas over here we can't afford 16 characters. So we now need to find out how we're going to balance it with only 4. Pretty extreme examples. But it's still like, okay, well, now their hit points have to be jacked up. Well, what are we going to do with ability damage? And, oh, man, okay, so you create essentially 2 very different games if you create too big a divergence at a systemic level, and then on a content level, you also create divergence straight across in terms of like, okay, this needs to be tested twice. That's all doable. It's all doable. But the thing is, when you're dealing with a game of length and breadth, that creates a crap ton of extra work, and that work ultimately, I would say, does not necessarily mean that we hire 1 billion more people necessarily. I think what it would ultimately cause is a hit in quality, right? And a deeper hit in quality than I was comfortable doing. So with Inquisition, we made the call to say, okay, some of this is not going to be as good as it could be were it purely on the newer generation. But at our original release window and our original plans, and frankly, just being aware of how many people had kind of played through the games from Origins on, we said, well, until we're really and truly into the next generation, it feels kind of unfair to cut those out. So you make your compromises, you eat your lumps. The other hidden cost that isn't just like QA testing, plus also all the work to create divergence, is that you have to completely look at how you manage memory. You have to do 2 passes on optimization. You have to, as well, go through certification on 5 platforms. You have to be on PC. You have to certify on PS4, then certify on PS4 in Europe, then certify on PS3 in Europe, and then PS3 in America. And it adds weight upon weight upon weight, which can be a real challenge. But at the same time, it creates a broader potential audience. So there is a trade-off that's positive as well as a trade-off that's negative. If I had the choice, it would be on less platforms.
Okay, that makes total sense actually. And it's interesting you mentioned more good versus bad basically. With this whole iterative thing that's going on. I don't think it's going to be a permanent thing, but generally speaking, you may not be able to answer this, and if you can't, that's fine. But do you feel like are you guys? Would you say you're mostly enthused about the concept of the Scorpio, and now with the PS4 Pro out, how much extra work is that creating for you guys to have to kind of manage this iterative console deal that's going on?
So but it's not fundamental, right? It's not fundamental in the way that the generational jump between a 360 and an Xbox One is. What you find, and you can see this even with games that have patched and some of that, is that the value proposition and the positioning that the console developers are taking is that, at least with the Pro, we haven't seen Microsoft kind of roll out here's what we're going to do, and if I had, I sure couldn't talk about it. But with the PS Pro, the value proposition was this will support 4K. This will support HDR. It was not, these will let you play games you can't play anywhere else. They deliberately are trying to not divide their base, right? As far as I can tell, the messaging, listening to Mark Cerny talk about it and stuff, he was saying, if you have cutting edge technology on your TV, if you have this amazing setup and you care about the highest fidelity, then this is a product that's for you, which I think is why they chose the name Pro, right? As opposed to PS4 better, PS4 newer, PS4, you know what I mean? It's more like, no. It's still absolutely generationally the same. You can expect the games to exist on both A and B. But if you had, if you have a higher end TV, this thing will play to that higher end TV strengths. We'll probably see a little bit of stuff like there'll be, obviously for 4K, you want upres textures. There might be a little bit more load time, but I don't think you're going to see that same level of difference in terms of the midstream consoles. Now, what Microsoft does, I don't know. Will be interesting to see if they make a play to say like, no, really, you should be using this one. Whereas I think Sony is deliberately saying it's okay, you don't need to, and we don't want to divide our customers. But this is better for the pro enthusiast.
That's a great answer. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate that, man. Jeff, you got any questions you want to ask, man? I can't hear Jeff at all.
He's muted.
Jeff, you muted?
Sorry. Yeah, no. My keyboard's really loud, so I try to mute myself when I'm not talking.
You got anything?
No, I was going to ask about Pro, but he covered it.
So, there you go. Yeah.
I just got mine today, so can't wait to toy around with
that. It looks good. Yeah. It looks good. I'm not gonna lie, dude. I played a little Uncharted 4, and I booted up the epilogue, and dude, the details.
Nobody does houses like Naughty Dog, like their kitchens.
Yeah,
houses. It's crazy.
Yeah. I wanted to sit down at the table in that kitchen and just like flip the newspaper open and say, "What's happening what's happening in England today?" Like, it just looks like a place that's been lived in. So it's great. I'm actually gonna after the podcast here, I'm gonna fire up Rise of the Tomb Raider and check out the the 4K 30 mode and the 1080p 60 mode. I'm pretty excited to see what that offers.
Yeah.
So I guess if nobody has any of the, does anybody have any? Because I've got one more question. Does anybody else have anything?
I have one more I'd like to throw out there.
Go ahead.
It's this shouldn't be a very long one. Mike, do you plan on being at the Anaheim PSX this year in December?
No, this year has been a bit of a zoo for me for travel. I've been in there's kind of a leadership program that EA runs, which is kind of for folks around my level, producers and designers and stuff that kind of is designed to kind of bring people from disparate teams together. So you're like, oh, cool. Hi there, person who worked on Battlefront. It's really nice to meet you. We've never met in a professional setting before. And it's been kind of like this cool, every 2 months I go and kind of do a week of this thing, but it's been, 6 full sessions. So it's kind of like, every month being away for a week and stuff. So trying to bring the travel down a bit, because I also have a bit of an addiction to the PAXs. I love PAX. They are energizing to me as a developer. It's like, wow, look at all these people who are really excited and enthused to be here. It's the opposite of an angry internet comment section, So I've been traveling enough this year. I'm like, okay, well, I always try to balance which things will I do, which things won't I tackle. So it's one that I really do want to check out at some point, but we'll see it in a lighter year, hopefully.
Awesome. And
whenever you're not traveling, whenever you're not at conferences or not at work or playing video games, what are your hobbies? What do you like to do? Just away from everything.
So I realized that a while back that I kind of am a one-note human being. Video games are kind of both my job and my hobbies, and also my passion. I like reading and long walks on the beach like everyone else, but like when I'm not working, I game, and when I'm not gaming, I'm a dad. Right, I've got a kiddo, and he's absolutely fantastic. So whatever his current passion is, like we're doing gymnastics, or I want to play a tuba. All right, cool, let's figure that out.
That's awesome.
Once you add dad to gamer, it's like you're pretty much done. You don't have a lot of other bandwidth. But the thing that I have been doing, which I realized I needed something that was a bit more of a hobby, and because to my mind, hobby is kind of like a great excuse to spend a little bit of money on something that's fun, but also kind of productive. It's like, oh, I got into photography and I own a great camera kind of thing. For me, that was Twitch streaming. So again, gaming. But I do that like Wednesdays and Saturdays and sometimes other times. And I'll just I'm working my way through Persona 4. Every Saturday night I will play an indie game that I picked up and put on my Steam list and haven't played before. So I'll like play it, and just people come in for Indie Saturdays because like, wow, I've never ever even heard of this. I'm like, I know, but it's rad. Check it out. It's got not zombies, and you're trying to save the world. So that kind of stuff. So that to me became something where it's like, this is why I have a green screen behind me. You end up kind of like fiddling and learning, and like suddenly I'm like, cool, it's a green screen works. That's how OSB settings work. Oh, cool. I now understand bitrate in a much more real and tangible way. All that kind of stuff helps you kind of understand a bit further what you're doing. And that was an excuse to buy a really expensive microphone.
You mentioned indie games, Mike. I've got to recommend Darkest Dungeon if you haven't played it.
Dude, I was a backer.
Oh, dude, it's so great. We had Chris Ross on the show a few weeks ago.
Chris is a smart guy.
He was awesome
really
to have
smart
on.
guy.
He was great to have on. Great guy. And dude, Darkest Dungeon is amazing.
Yeah, highly back that. Recommend it. It is balls hard, but other than that, it is one of the best experiences in past little while.
I actually finished it, and apparently I'm like one of 1% of people who actually finished the game.
Holy crap!
I wasn't aware that not many people have actually finished the game, so I feel good about myself.
Well, you get close, and then it just punches you right in the genitalia. Anyway,
I am a long-time Dark Souls player, and that is like I love Darkest Dungeon, but I could never go through and do that again. Like I'm like that game took fucking years off my life. But so I've got one more question. We'll end it here. It's a really short, really easy question. If you could pick one developer, like one studio to like team with on something, like who would it be?
Ooh, that's interesting. Who would the one team? Oh man, that's hard.
Okay, two.
Just,
I don't think you understand what a short, easy question is, John.
Yeah, exactly. If you could merge your career with yet another. Okay, you know what? I'm going to rapid fire some people I really respect in the industry that I would love to collaborate with, and I'm not going to narrow it down to one.
That's a good idea.
I would love to work with Tim Schafer. I met him a few times. The guy's amazing.
Nice.
He trolled me when I was doing an interview with the BAFTAs, so I feel special. I think Jake Solomon, who's the guy behind the XCOM, the reboots, is an amazing developer, really thoughtful, really responsive to his fans. His love of tactics is obvious. He's it for Axis. I would love to, not even partner with so much as like sit at the font of knowledge from software, because like the Dark Souls games are just spectacular. They are works of absolute art, from concept to execution in every level. Who wouldn't want to work with Miyamoto, right? Wouldn't that be a dream?
Oh man.
Harvey Smith and the team at Arcane are exceptional. Again, super excited for Dishonored 2. Just trying to think. I mean, I got to partner with the Failbetter guys, and I'm a big Fallen London fan, so that was actually pretty rad. So that was nice. And I gotta say, the Obsidian folks, like in a lot of ways, we've got a lot of shared DNA because they worked on the Infinity stuff and back in the Torment days. Some of the folks there are Fallout, original Fallout folks, or even back to Wasteland. Brian Fargo's team over at In Exile. There's so many great teams that would be great to kind of collaborate with or work with in some way. And all these people that I look at as kind of like industry luminaries, right? And we've all had missteps, we've all had kind of off games and stuff like that too. But at the same time, what I see in a lot of the people I mentioned is a passion and a dedication and kind of a conscience to the work they present. So those folks all kind of rock my world.
That's a great answer, man. Speaking of rock and worlds, man, you rocked our world tonight, dude. Thank you so much for coming on. Like this was amazing. This was probably one of the best episodes we've ever done, if not the best.
Cool.
And we'll just look like this is insight that like you don't get very often, right? And it's kind of it's a peek into the dev cycle that I've never this has just been an absolute learning experience for me. So awesome. I mean, Mike, thank you so much for coming on and talking with us, man, and putting up with an hour and a half of questions and badgering. We really appreciate that, man. It says a lot. We're not a huge outfit, but we're growing slowly. But it says a lot about you that you came on to just kind of talk with us and tell us a little bit about the dev cycle and what makes Dragon Age tick. And it's just really, man, thank you.
No problem. Love the way you guys run this podcast. So
thank you.
I appreciate you jumping on and answering all my random questions.
You do have a lot of random questions.
Well, I mean, that's how it works. Like, he will say something, and that will trigger something else in my head. I'm like, oh, wow, I don't want to ask him this question.
I just want to point out, I love the fact that Finneman, I won't call you Torpedo Vegas anymore.
You can call me Torpedo Vegas.
All right, fine. I love the fact that Torpedo Vegas, we have our own SDGC DMs, and he says, "Can I ask the next question?" I'm like, "Sure." And then JT's like, "Hey, Mike," and I was like, "Suck it, suck it, Torpedo. You just got owned."
I was trying to be nice, just jumping in that time. So lesson learned.
Did you get your question answered?
I did. You answered.
Okay, good. Just make sure.
I mean,
but go ahead.
No. I was going to ask something silly at that point, but
okay. So real quick before we Multiverse Mob in Chat says Torpedo Vegas sounds like a character from 100-Foot Robot Golf.
That's hilarious.
So real quick before we go, Enrique, why don't you give a quick plug?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I want to say thank you again to our special guest, Mike. Mike, again, just like what John was saying, I mean, this was fascinating for me as a gamer to get this kind of insight. And like many of us on this panel here, I'm sure we're all thankful for the hard work and dedication that you guys put into making some great, putting together some great experiences for gamers. So thank you for that. Yeah, so as John mentioned, I'm the founder of Basement Radio Arcade Podcast. John is a co-host as well, and we go live every Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Very, very similar platform to Super Deformed Gamescast. We just talk about video games, games that we're playing, industry news, and every once in a while we might poke fun at fanboys. But it's a great show. We've had some great guests on. We've had some industry guests on. We've had David Jaffe on. We've had Ryan McCaffrey on. We had Greg Kasavin on from Super Giant Games.
Greg is amazing.
I'm still jealous about you guys getting David.
That was a good get for you guys, man. We were.
I watched that episode. It was a good one.
Yeah, and it's funny because I used to be I know Greg from his days at GameSpot, and that's how we connected, and we reconnected actually after years. I was a community moderator, and he was the senior editor at the time. So. But yeah, check us out. We're on YouTube, the Basement Radio Arcade Podcast. Again, we go live Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you want to give me a follow, I'm on Twitter at Aries Gamer. That's AREEZGAMER.
Awesome. Thanks, Enrique. And just real quick, Sunday we have our third episode of the Sport Class Podcast for gamers with anxiety, like myself. Please feel free to tune in to that, especially if you suffer from any form of anxiety, be it generalized anxiety, social anxiety, if it manifests as, like me, if you're a massive hypochondriac. It's a healing place for people who share your affliction, and we don't even necessarily talk games. We talk about coping mechanisms and our experiences on a daily basis, and just kind of give you guys with anxiety, gamers with anxiety, a place to talk, and just I guess talk about it and unload yourself without fear of anybody judging you, because that's not going to happen here. So that's going to happen on Sunday at 6 p.m. and we've gotten a really good response for that, and it looks like it may turn into a thing that keeps on going if people wanted to. I've had a few people DM me and saying, "Hey, this means a lot to me. Please keep it up." So I don't know. We'll see. It's something I'd like to continue doing. And then next week, finally, the SDGC T-shirts are going on sale next week on Tuesday. It's been a long time coming, just like Final Fantasy 15. But the shirts,
dude, I can't even believe that game is.
It's
2 weeks away now?
It's weeks.
It's happening. Yeah,
2 weeks, dude.
This year, we're within a month.
The
Last Guardian and Final Fantasy 15 are happening.
There's only 2 more SDGCs until Final Fantasy 15.
God, don't do that. Oh my lord! I can't wait. I'm a
Blows
Final
my
Fantasy
mind.
guy. I'm a Final Fantasy guy all the way.
I was still a teenager when that game came out.
If I may indulge myself 1 second, could I give my plug real quick before we?
Oh yeah, dude, go. Yeah, go, and then I know Mike's got to go. So give me.
Thank you for indulging me. I appreciate it.
No, dude, go ahead.
For those unfamiliar, because my camera decided to die, so all my information is not on my talkie thing. I'm the founder of the NOLA Nerdcast, the largest New Orleans-based nerd show around. We do things slightly differently, same format as these shows, but instead of games only, we also cover comics, TV, movies, and basically just nerd culture as a whole. And we unfortunately record concurrently to Enrique's show, so feel free to pop in, say hi, and then roll out. But we record Wednesdays on YouTube and iTunes, and you can follow me on Twitter at Nolan Nerdcast because it's all about that synergy.
Awesome. And just for anybody who doesn't know, Matt, or as we know him, Torpedo Vegas, is also the newest member of SDGC. If I think I said that last week, but just in case I did, Matt is a new permanent member of the show. And please go follow Mike on Twitch, by the way, www.twitch.tv/Mike_Laidlaw. It's Matt put it out there in chat.
Awesome. Thanks.
Please check him out on Twitter. T-shirts next week on sale. I'm going to try to keep them as cheap as possible. I expect to sell like 10 of them, so whatever. but they're going to be there if anybody wants them. And Sport Class podcast on Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And as always, and once again, thanks to Mike. As always, it's not always poetry, and we don't always agree, but we always keep it real. So until then, we will see you guys next week. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't. Please do that. Bye, guys.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.